Well, hello and welcome to the Fanco Wrestling Show, my new wrestling show where I'm talking all about college wrestling news, high school wrestling news, and just the overall wrestling world. This week, I'm talking about the Ashnault Kolodzik match, who will stay number one by the end of the year, and the status of the team race at NCAAs. My name's Josiah, and I'm talking all about wrestling news. I wanted to start this show because I felt that there needed to be some more engagement with the wrestling community. I want to hear everybody else's thoughts on what's going on in the wrestling world. So please, as I'm talking throughout this video, let me know your comments. Let's start a conversation and get your opinions out there. So I'm going to go through a lot of these topics, talk about them for a couple of minutes, and we'll go from there. So let's get straight into what's happening in the wrestling world this week. So first up on the list is Ashnault versus Kolodzik. This was number 2 versus number 1, and this was at 149 pounds. Rutgers versus Princeton. Of course, they wrestled in the duel this past weekend, and it was a great match, at least for one side. Of course, Ashnault came up on top. He dominated Kolodzik 10-2 to become the number 1 ranked wrestler at 149 pounds. So this is really interesting. If you watch this match now, Ashnault, he just looked dominant. He came out there on the mat and he just scored, multiple times. He was turning Kolodzik over on his back, and there was nothing that he could do about that. With a couple of nice moves, Kolodzik was hardly even shooting. He got called for stalling at one point, and this is interesting because these two have met before. They have a history. They wrestled. This is their 5th time wrestling, I believe. And, I have some of those old scores, but right now, Ashnault is up in the series 3-2. They first wrestled at Midlands. Actually, they wrestled twice. Kolodzik won one. Ashnault won one, vice versa to each other. Kolodzik won in 2016, and Ashnault won in 2017. That was the last time. Now, this is really, really interesting that this is what happens now, because what happens at the NCAA tournament, this is going to be a tough match, but if Kolodzik can't even take Ashnault down, what's going to happen? And one of my favorite things about this match, is, and I'm not a Rutgers fan. I'm just a fan of good wrestling, and that's what I always like to say. I don't care where you're from. I just want to see a good match. And this, you saw Ashnault after the match. He's holding up 10. That's right, 10 to Coach Ayers of Princeton. And this is funny because this is why he said it. So earlier in the week, when Ayers was asked about the match because he knew it was going to be a tough one, he said Ashnault can't score on him. Can't score on him. Ashnault is good. Don't get me wrong. He's really, really good. But I don't think he can do it. We beat him 2 years ago at 141, and they beat us. But Ashnault is up a weight this year. Kolodzik gotten stronger and way more consistent. So I think it'll be 2 takedowns to none. Yikes. Eat your words much, Air. I mean, this is not the outcome that they thought would happen. Ashnault got just as big, and that's why he was holding up those 10 fingers. 10. That's right. I scored 10 points on Ashnault. I put up 10 points to 2. What a great match that was. And that leads me into my next topic, which is, can Rutgers have a national champ, their first national champ this year? So, this is an interesting topic that I actually read about earlier this week, is that Rutgers has never had a national champ in their wrestling history. So this year, what's funny is they could have two national champs from Rutgers, from the same school, this very year. Their first ever in the history of Rutgers wrestling. And of course, those two I'm talking about, one is Ashnault, who just won the great match against Kolodzik, 10-2, and the other one is Suriano at 133 pounds. So, both of these guys, it's not going to be easy for either of them to be the number 1 wrestler at their weight. And of course, right now, Suriano is coming off of 2 losses and Ashnault is undefeated. So both are really tough guys. I talked a little bit about Ashnault already, but of course he's placed at NCAAs before. He's placed 8th, 4th, and 6th, and he was injured this past year. He's wrestled, this is like his 5th year wrestling. He started in 2014, and of course now it's 2019. So kid's tough, and he's rooting for that national title. He's gunning for that. He's coming hard, and guys better watch out. He beat Michael Jordan, who was number 1 at the time, and Mitch Feinsilver, who was number 6 at the time from Duke. He also beat Lugo from Iowa, who's around number 11 ranked. So all tough matches, and of course this past weekend he beat Kolodzik at number 1, and he's going to have all those guys, against him again at the national tournament. Even in the conference championships, he's going to have a tough road, but he could be one of their first national champions. And the other, Suriano. So Suriano, of course, he was in the national finals last year, lost to Spencer Lee. Year before that, he was at Penn State. So Penn State transferred out to Rutgers. So he lost his year of wrestling there, and now as a junior, he's had a tough year, doing a great job, great season so far. But so far, he has lost to DeSanto, and he lost to Fix. So those are two guys who are going to be out there in his weight, gunning for a national title just as well. But he did major Mickey Philippi, who's around that number 4, number 5 spot in the rankings right now. Very tough kid from Pitt. And he still has Michich and Pletcher in his way from Michigan and Ohio State. So Rutgers, this could be a record-breaking, a historic year for their program if either Suriano or Ashnault wins. Maybe it's both of them. Who do you think has the better chance of winning a national title? Personally, I don't want to get too into it, but I think Ashnault has a little bit better of a shot than Suriano, but do not count Suriano out. He is a tough wrestler. He's out there for his national title. So let's talk a little bit about now the status of not only the individuals at nationals in March, but let's talk about the status of the team race. So this will be very interesting because this upcoming week we see Penn State wrestle Ohio State. Now, of course, this past weekend, Penn State wrestled Michigan, and they beat them pretty handily. There were some really, really good matches. Nolf's match was good. He took it to him. And Bo Nickel, tough. I mean, he wrestled tough. He pinned his kid. And, who had a really good match was, of course, Vincenzo Joseph, who went into OT. And so, but they took it to Michigan, and they showed him that, no, we're looking for that national title. And this is interesting because Michigan beat Ohio State 2 weeks ago, and they beat them pretty good. Now, another team that I believe is in this race, besides Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, is Iowa. And Iowa, I don't know if they were in the hunt at the beginning of the season. Obviously, Iowa's always a tough team to beat. Very tough team. But now that they have a lot of these guys coming in here, you got DeSanto, who we weren't sure how he was going to do with his crazy freak out at NCAAs last year. But you also got Alex Marinelli. You got Sam Stoll at heavyweight, they're showing some strong potential. But Iowa, they don't wrestle Penn State this year. They don't wrestle Michigan, and they don't even wrestle Ohio State. So they don't wrestle any of these teams. So it's kind of hard to see where they stack up against the competition. We'll see this for the first time probably at Big Tens. And Big Tens, that may be the really interesting story here. But anyway, let's get into this. So Penn State, look, this last year was one of the best national tournaments I've ever seen, with Ohio State and Penn State just battling each other for that first place spot. And, either of those teams could win. Of course, it came down to Bo Nickel and Miles Martin. This year, I think Penn State's running away with it. And I think they're running away with it far. So, I think really the question here is who's taking second? Who's taking second out of these other teams? Penn State, they have a couple guys who could be all in the national finals. Bo Nickel, Mark Hall, Vincenzo Joseph, Jason Nolf, all who I think could be in the national finals, if not national champions. Then they have their All-Americans, who is Nikoli, Kassar, Rashid, and possibly even Roman Bravo Young, RBY. So that's 8 placers out of 10 on their team. So that's kind of hard to beat, and I don't think these other teams have that this year. They have a lot of guys who could be each of these teams has somebody who, at least 1 or 2 people who could be national champions. And one of those teams is, of course, Ohio State, who Penn State and Ohio State are wrestling this next week, and I'll get to that in a little bit of my predictions for that match, which I'm going through and I'm so excited for. So the Ohio State ranked guys right now, you have Luke Pletcher, Joey McKenna, Micah Jordan, Keyshawn Hayes, Miles Martin, and Colin Moore. Now, we will be getting the Colin Moore-Bo Nickel match this weekend, which that'll be interesting to see what happens there. Both really tough guys. But so they have 6 guys in the lineup who I think could All-American, with a couple of these winning, potentially Miles Martin winning, Colin Moore, depending. I don't think he's going to beat Bo Nickel, but we'll see. Bo's bumping up a weight, and Colin Moore is a strong guy. Now, of course, Ohio State lost to Michigan in the duel, but Ohio State is always a really tough tournament team. They've guys that score points, and they've guys that are looking for that national title. So Michigan, so they have Micic and Massa, who's number 7 at 165, Miles Amin, and Mason Parris. So Miles Amin, tough kid. Both of the Amins actually are really tough, and Mason Parris at 285, another potential looking for that national title, and of course, Micic at 133. Micic has a lot of guys in his way. All these guys have people in their way, obviously, but Micic has Suriano. He has DeSanto, and a couple of these matches will play into the team race, but I think Micic can do very well. And if somebody like an RBY knocks off a Micic, there's more points for Penn State. Or if Micic knocks off an RBY from Penn State, then we're getting some more points for Michigan. So can Michigan beat Ohio State for that second place spot? Potentially. I think they could. I think they're a little bit low in the lineup. One team that I think can really ramp it up is Iowa. Of course, Iowa has Spencer Lee, who is one of the toughest kids in the country. Of course, he has Rivera in his way at 125. But a little bit, I don't want to say an easier field than last year, but a little bit, with the competition. And then they have DeSanto, Caleb Young, and Alex Marinelli. Alex Marinelli at 165, who's gunning for Vincenzo, and a couple of these other guys. And then Jacob Warner and Sam Stoll at heavyweight. So that heavyweight competition is going to be interesting with Gable Stevenson from Minnesota versus Sam Stoll, even versus an Anthony Kassar from Penn State. We've yet to see those guys wrestle, and I really want to see what the status is there. So I believe that that Iowa will finish above Ohio State. Just my prediction. I think they're beating Michigan as well. Another contender too is actually Oklahoma State. So Oklahoma State, of course, they have Nick Piccinini. They fix Feller who's number 4 at 149, Smith, who's at 174, number 5, and Derek White at 285, who's another tough heavyweight. So Sam Stoll is a heavyweight who's going to be facing off against Derek White, who they didn't wrestle earlier in the dual meet this season, but that's critical. That's critical for the team race, seeing what happens there. So what are my predictions for who wins the team race? Number 1, Penn State. I think they're at the top. Number 2, Iowa. They're beating Ohio State. But as I said, Ohio State's a really tough dual tournament team, so they're taking 3rd. They have a lot of guys who will do well and score bonus points, which is critical in winning that title. In 4th place, I have Michigan, and 5th place, Oklahoma State. Whether it turns out that way or not, that has yet to be determined, obviously. Any of these teams are in the hunt for a national title. Maybe somebody gets hurt. Maybe somebody loses a crazy match. At the national tournament, anything can happen. Trust me, anything can happen. So those are my predictions. What do you guys think? What are your top 5 teams? Give me the order down below and who you think will rank at not WPOs, but national tournament. And this week is a very, very important week. Penn State versus Ohio State this week. So Penn State versus Ohio State on Friday night. I will be in attendance in Columbus, and this is my first away dual meet. I'm used to being at Penn State. I'm a Penn State grad. Love the atmosphere there, and the dual meet last year was honestly one of the best dual meets of all time. Hands down, one of the best of all time. Of course, Penn State pulled it off with some pretty amazing victories. Putting guys in where they shouldn't have been, bumping guys, doing all this stuff, and having guys just pull out bonus points where it wasn't expected. And this week, one of the biggest matches is Bo Nickel versus Colin Moore at 197. That's number 1 versus number 2. Of course, last week we got the number 1 versus number 2 of Kolodzik and Ashnault. And this week we have Moore and Nickel. So let's just go through the lineup and see what I think the final score will be and what the outcomes of the match will be. So let's first start at 125. So you have Devin Schnupp from Penn State, and you have Malik Heinzelman from Ohio State. And I'm just going to go through this order with projected lineups, the best guys at each weight. There are a couple guys injured right now, or we think maybe injured, or we don't know what's going on with them. I'm going to throw them in there anyway because they could have just been resting for this type of match. So let's at 125, Schnupp versus Heinzelman. I think right here, the decision, I'm actually going to put this towards Penn State. Schnupp is a kid who he deserves. He got thrown into that Penn State lineup as a backup. He's actually a tough kid who placed at the PIAA state tournament in high school. But Schnupp, he doesn't get the credit he deserves. He's been working out hard in the room with the toughest guys in the country, and he's wrestling tough kids. He had Suriano drop out 2 years ago, and whereas he got thrown in there. This past year, he had Gavin, who is supposedly supposed to be the starter at 125, and now he's gone. So Schnupp, he has his shot to shine, and he's a tough kid. He's done well. I think he's pulling off the victory here. At 133 is going to be a doozy if it happens. Roman Bravo Young versus Luke Pletcher. Now, listen, Roman Bravo Young is making his way onto the scene as a freshman, and he's done very well this year so far. He got hurt a couple weeks ago, tweaked something whenever he was doing one of his crazy flips, whenever somebody was trying to shoot in on him, and he kind of tweaked his leg, I believe. But going up against number 6 Pletcher, look, I think RBY is tough, and I will be rooting for him. However, I don't think he's going to beat Pletcher. It's going to be close, though, and I think he's going to come out with the victory. Close score, just as Pletcher usually keeps it. So I'm giving the decision there to Luke Pletcher. At 141 is another ranked match. We have number 7 Nick Lee from Penn State going up against number 2 Joey McKenna from Ohio State. McKenna is tough. So is Nick Lee. Now these two, they wrestled last year in the dual meet, and McKenna won pretty handily. I believe it may have been a major decision. If not, it was close to it. And so that's why I have to give the edge still to Joey McKenna. Coming from Stanford, now he's at Ohio State, and really, really good wrestler. So solid wrestler. 49, Verclaren from Penn State versus number 3 Mike Jordan. And I think Verclaren's okay. So he's a great wrestler. Haven't seen that much great out of him this season, so that's why I have to give the edge to Micah Jordan, who has just shown his eliteness, his strength so far this season. And I'm going to give that just again a decision to Ohio State. So let's get into 157, who is going to be Jason Nolf versus Keyshawn Hayes of Ohio State. And as we know, Jason Nolf's a pinner. And I think Nolf beating Columbus. He's going to want to hype up his crowd, his fans, and that's what I think he's getting a pin here. Keyshawn Hayes is a tough guy. He's a gritty guy. He's not one to go out there and turn his back. But Nolf just has a way of handling these guys where it doesn't matter if you're number 2 kid in the country or you're an unranked wrestler. He can find a way to pin you. So I'm giving Nolf a pin. And so that's, this is really getting into the beef of Penn State's lineup now. The 4 horsemen, as they're calling them this year. And at 65, we have number 1, Chenzo Joseph versus Tayshawn Campbell. Now, these guys, they've wrestled around before, and I'm going to have to give the edge to Chenzo. Even with a tough match that Chenzo had last week, and, Vincenzo, he usually keeps it close, but he finds a way to pull it out, and that's why I have to give the win here to Vincenzo Joseph, possibly with a major. Actually, I'm giving him this time. Number 174, we have number 1 Mark Hall versus number 18 Ethan Smith. So this is one of Ohio State's. He's a ranked guy, a little bit lower in the rankings, but he is a ranked guy, and he's done well this season, but not like a Mark Hall. Mark Hall is out here for blood. Ever since that Valencia match where he completely dominated and rode him out for like 3 minutes or something. Mark Hall he's out here to win. He's pulling off the major against Smith, and I think this is really where Penn State starts to pull ahead. And so until we reach 184, which is Shakur Rashid versus Miles Martin. And Miles Martin, of course, we know wrestled Bo Nickel in the past multiple times, and it'd be actually pretty funny to see him bump up to wrestle Bo Nickel. It doesn't happen in college, but it would be pretty crazy to see that. But Miles Martin, I think here he definitely pulls out the win against Rashid. Rashid is a tough kid, and he's going to give him a battle for sure, but I just think Miles Martin, he's been denied his national title last year, and he wants it this year. He's winning this match by decision. Going into 197, this is the highlight of the evening. Number 1, Bo Nickel versus number 2, Colin Moore. These two have not wrestled in the past because, of course, Bo Nickel is bumping up a weight from years in the past where he's wrestled 184. So Bo Nickel bumping up, and this is going to get the place going. It really is. People are going to be going wild over this match. They may make it the last match. I doubt it, but it'd be awesome if it was. And so these two wrestling, I think Nickel pulls out the win. And I think it's going to be a close match within a takedown for sure, unless Bo can find a way to turn him. Now, what's interesting is Bo's hardly even wrestled this season, and by that I mean he's been a pinning machine. He has over 10 pins so far this season. Half of his matches, more than half of his matches, are pins. Is he going to get the pin against Colin Moore? Unlikely. Bo does get those pins against ranked guys. If he can catch him, if he can work something, we could see that, but I don't see it happening in this match. But I do give the edge to Nickel. And finally, at 285 at the heavyweight, from Penn State, we have Anthony Cassar. And from Ohio State, we have number 17, Chase Singletary. So Singletary from Ohio State, a little bit lower in the rankings. I don't know much about him, but I know Cassar is a solid wrestler. He's done well so far this season, so I have to give the edge to him. So right now, as I have it, Schnupp is going to win for Penn State at 25. Pletcher is going to win at 33. Ohio State wins again with McKenna. Then again with Micah Jordan. North wins at 57, 65, Chenzo, and 74, Mark Hall. At 84, Miles Martin's going to pull off a win, and then we're going to rally off Penn State. Bo Nickel at 97 and Cassar at 285 to give the match a final score of 23-12, giving that edge to Penn State. So I don't think this match is going to be as close as last year. I think we're going to get some great matches, but in my opinion, Penn State's got this in the bag. So anyways, let's move on to the next topic, which is It's a little bit of Penn State news still, I guess, and that's the news that Gavin Teasdale has left Penn State. Now, this happened a couple weeks ago, and maybe you didn't even know that this happened. You may be thinking that this happened again because it was announced in November that Gavin Teasdale was leaving Penn State due to like personal issues that he was dealing with in a kind of mysterious tweet, and it was kind of left at that. Well, then at the scuffle, Teasdale was added to the weigh-in sheet, and he was supposed to wrestle at the scuffle. Well, that didn't end up happening. He scratched. Whether he didn't make weight, whether there's something else going on, we don't know. We don't know much about the situation. So this past week, Kale revealed in an interview with a local state college newspaper that Teasdale's no longer in the lineup. He's no longer at Penn State. So he said this to the Daily Collegian. Gavin is not going to be on our team. He's being removed from the roster probably right now or today. That's at the time. So don't expect to see Gavin. We obviously wish him well and expect him to transfer. So now that Gavin's gone from Penn State, what happens? Where will he go? And I think this can be really interesting to see where Teasdale ends up deciding to wrestle in college now, because Teasdale was one of the top recruits of last year. He was, of course, like a 4-time PIAA state champ in AA, and he's just an all-around great national wrestler, solid. He's a stud, and any college to pick him up at 125 would be a great asset. So there are two schools really where I see him doing really well. So the first school, maybe it's unexpected, but it is actually Pitt. So think about this. He's around the Pittsburgh area, Whitfield guy. So Teasdale, I think, and the thing is, Pitt needs a 125-pounder. They need somebody to fill in, have a tough kid at that weight, and he'll be close to home. And he already showed that he wanted to be somewhat close to home and going to Penn State in the state of Pennsylvania. He wants to show how dominant Pennsylvania wrestling is. So why not go to Pitt? And Pitt already has a couple of tough kids. Their heavyweight is actually doing pretty well this season, and of course Mickey Philippi at 133. They could have a 1-2 hit, 25-33. I don't know how well that those two know each other, where maybe they could be talking now, trying to get him into the program. But those two training together, Philippi and Teasdale, that's pretty tough wrestling room right there. So that's one place I expect him to transfer to, is maybe Pitt. The other school that I expect him maybe to go to is Lock Haven. And I say Lock Haven, it's funny. Some people were joking about him going to Rutgers because Suriano, of course, transferred from Penn State to Rutgers a couple of years ago. Now, of course, Teasdale was not going to go to Rutgers because, well, I mean, he could actually, but I don't think so. It could be another great training partner, but I think Lock Haven is another good choice. We've seen in the past that Lock Haven, I like to kind of joke on my own and say Lock Haven is the school of like second chances, the school for troubled kids, and I say that in every good intention. I really do, because I think that a lot of these guys who've had mistakes in their past, maybe done things, and I'm not saying Teasdale has done any of that by any means. I'm just saying like anything bad. I'm just saying that it's a great school for guys for second chances. So we saw that in Chance Marsteller, who he struggled in the past with a couple things in his history, but he's one of the top kids in the country right now nationally in the NCAA, just as he was in high school. He's back onto the scene, and Lock Haven helped him get there. The other one is Thomas Haynes, who was at Penn. He's another Pennsylvania wrestler, went to Penn State, wasn't making the lineup, transferred to Ohio State. Of course, then he had Kyle Snyder there at 285. He transferred to Lock Haven and did, pretty well there. So that's kind of the status of that. So I think Gavin may fit well with that atmosphere. It's another Pennsylvania school, just a little bit away from State College, so that's not bad. It's about a 30-minute ride away, so he's used to that drive. But I think I could see Teasdale going to Pitt or Lock Haven. Let me know, where would you love to see Teasdale go? Maybe it's one of your wrestling schools that you're a big fan of, big supporter of. Let me know in the comments below, where do you see Teasdale going from here? And let's move on to the last topic of the day. So this is kind of a fun topic to talk about, and it's who will be number one at the end of the year. So let's look at the current list of ranked wrestlers and which one of these ranked wrestlers, which ones, if any, will remain number one by the time March rolls around at the NCAA tournament. And I think actually a big chunk of this list will remain number one. So let me just read down the list real quick, and then we'll go through and see who will stay number one. So at 125, we have Sebastian Rivera. 133, we have Steven Micic. 41, we have Yanni. 49, Kolodzik. 57, Jason Nolf. And actually that Kolodzik, I'm going off a little bit, but that's actually will be Ashnault now. Jason Nolf at 57. 65, we got Vincenzo. 74, Mark Hall. 84, Miles Martin. 97, Bo Nickel. And 285, we have Gable Stevenson. So those are all your number one ranked wrestlers right now. Of course, the biggest change this past weekend was whenever Ashnault beat Kolodzik to earn that number one spot. So which of these guys will be number one at the end of the year? Well, I think, first off, 125, we're going to have a change there. Rivera is number one, and he deserves to be number one. But Lee, he's out. He's out for blood. He wants that title. He wants to be a 4-time national champ. And, of course, Rivera still stands in his way, as well as a couple other guys at 125. But Lee is out there. I think he's taking that number one spot at the end of the season. 33, right now, like I said, it is Steven Micic. My money, and this is a crowded field of studs. My money right now is actually on Dayton Fix from Oklahoma State, and that's just my personal pick. We've seen him wrestle well all year. We've seen him go back and forth with a couple of these guys, DeSanto, Suriano. Nobody's really wrestled Micic yet, but he's wrestled tough all year. I see Dayton Fix coming in with the first, freshman year strong national tournament. So I think he's taking that spot. But either way, I think at 33, Micic has shown some strength, but that's really anybody's field to take. So at 41, I think Yanni, he's winning that. He's staying number one. 49. Will there be a change? So originally when I looked at this list this past week, it was Kolodzik. Now it's Ashnault. So I think Ashnault will stay number one. He showed dominance in his win over Kolodzik, and so that's why I think he's remaining number one. At 57, Nolf, he's taking the cake. He's winning. 65, Chenzo, toss up. But the funny thing is, I bet a Penn State guy, I always root for Penn State. A couple years ago against Imar, whenever he had that crazy national finals, whenever he pinned Imar, I bet against him. And from that moment on, I said I will never bet against Vincenzo again. And here we are. He's in the hunt for a third national title, and I'm not betting against Chenzo. So you got my vote here, Chenzo. Get that national title. At 74, we have Mark Hall. This is tough because you got Mark Hall and Valencia both at 174 looking for that title. Valencia, as a heat from Arizona State, we saw he beat Mark Hall last year for a national title. He lost in the semis 2 years ago, and Hall ended up winning the national title. And this year, I think we could see those two again in the finals. And I think, last year's Heat showed dominance over Mark Hall. This year, in Rec Hall, Mark Hall showed dominance over Zahid. And I'm pretty upset that I had to miss that match. But of course, it is Rec Hall. It's going to be a different match on the stage of the national finals come March, but I think Mark Hall will pull off that win very, very slightly. I give the edge to Mark Hall. So let's go to 84, and that's Miles Martin. I think he really wants that national title this year, now that he lost it last year to Bo Nickel. I'm keeping Miles Martin at number 1 at 84. 97, Bo Nickel. That's something that could change this week, in that Bo Nickel and Colin Moore, who's number 2 from Ohio State at 97, are wrestling in the dual meet come Friday. And I still give the edge to Bo Nickel. I think he showed dominance against everybody he's wrestled so far this year. And I think Nickel will remain number 1 at 97. And at 285, we have Gable Stevenson. So will Gable Stevenson, as a freshman, remain number 1? I say yes. I say definitely yes. He will remain number 1, and that will actually give us 2 of the Apple Valley guys, Mark Hall and Gable Stevenson, who will be number 1 national champs this year. So that's my list on who I think will remain number 1. Is there anybody who you see really changing out? How many out of the 10 right now would you say will remain number 1? Of course, I got that tweet from Flow Wrestling. They tweeted that out. I thought it was a fun thing just to talk about a little bit. So those are my results there, and that'll do it for today's show. So I appreciate you guys sticking around watching me and just talking about wrestling and commenting down below, giving this video a like, just because you love wrestling for wrestling's sake. And make sure you join me every week where I talk about the latest wrestling news, everything that's going on in the world of wrestling, right here at Fanco Wrestling. Thanks for watching.